This is February 27th, 2020. This is Rossi Chiropractic Center, and I'm Dr. Aaron Rossi, and we're talking tonight about the advantages of stress. Okay, now you guys are welcome to ask questions. Know that I'm recording it, and I plan on posting this, so your voice will be remembered forever on the intertubes if you choose to ask a question. Now, starting off, I want to tell you a story about my beloved daughter, okay, which kind of frames what I want to talk about a little bit here. So my daughter, I'll let her stay anonymous a little bit. I won't call her by name, but so she was born with a problem in her leg, and that problem stunted the growth of that leg. So her one leg is shorter than the other. All right. So what that does is it forces her to move a little unevenly. You know, it makes actually her hips a little bit unlevel. We had to deal with this and worked on it. We've done various things and so on, but it's one of the things that my daughter has to deal with as a challenge. Okay. So now where that challenge shows up is, as an example, because the leg is shorter, she relies more heavily on her other leg. She puts a lot of strength and effort in that side, pushes off from that side, leans and stands on that side. So she doesn't use the shorter leg as much. And so as naturally you'd expect, that leg is weaker. Okay, it's actually a lot weaker. And so when a leg is a lot weaker, not just the muscles, but also the bones are a lot weaker. You know, like the whole kind of the moral of some of the story we're going to talk about is the use of it builds the strength of it, right? So she's not using it. She's not challenging it, and so she's creating, well, growing weakness in essence, right? So that manifested itself on one of her birthdays. Again, I'll let her be anonymous. On one of her birthdays, she's running through our kitchen and she slips and she falls and she breaks her leg. It would have been a fall that would have been like, oh, okay, get up and keep going for any other kid, but because my daughter has a problem in her leg and a weak leg, she broke all up and down her femur here, okay? And we didn't know at first, but I took her to my office the next day and got x-rays of her, and sure enough, right there. And so it was awful. It's terrible, it's painful. And yet she healed and she recovered. So that short part of the story moves on, right? And we move forward a couple years later, and she's at school one day, and she's up on the gym, in her gym, and she's up on the bleachers, and she just hops down off one, and just that hop breaks her leg again. Different spot, she breaks her lower leg, okay? So now, on top of the painful memory of the first break and the pain of this current break, she's also now basically dealing with a morale issue, right? She is rather heartbroken about the lack of confidence in her body. You know, it's like it plays on you when you're dealing with health things. It like needles into your consciousness, to your awareness. It undermines your thinking on yourself. Okay, it's demoralizing. So she cried a lot, right? Not just because of the pain, but the pain up here and in here. She cried a lot. And so finally I sat her down one time and I'm like, listen, when you break a bone, what your body does is it deploys these special little cells. What it does is it kind of eats away some of the old cells, some of the broken cells, some of the cells that aren't being used so much anymore. And right behind that, new cells are being made, right? And so what happens is your body remends that break and you heal. But here's the thing, the bone along where that break was is mended denser than it was before. It's denser than the neighboring bone. In fact, a bone that properly heals is less likely to break in that spot than any other spot. It makes your bone actually stronger now when you properly heal. But when it makes the bone stronger than it was before. She's like, really? She gives me a smile for the first time around this. She stopped crying and she didn't cry again about it, right? There was this little inkling of understanding that, like, her body's still worth having some faith in. There's still the strength expressing itself inside her. And by virtue of the pain and the suffering she just experienced, she's actually getting stronger, right? That trauma caused greater strength physically, okay? Now, this class would be interesting, but maybe a touch dull if we only talked about physical, but we're also going to talk about the things, other parts in our life, the stuff up here and in here, our heart and soul, our minds, our emotions, right? And so for her, she gained this sense, a better sense of morale, but here's another area where this expresses itself. One summer we go on a family trip, and we're walking around Washington, D.C. It's my sister's family and my family, and we got a lot of kids, and we're walking around, and it's summer, it's hot, it's muggy, it's Washington, D.C., and you go from museum to museum. And what kids do when they're hot and tired and muggy and museum to museum, every kid's gonna be like, I'm hot, I'm tired, my feet hurt, right? Every kid, you know, they all spend a little time doing this, right? Well, every kid except her. Now she wasn't like, let's go, no problem, right? But she never once complained and bellyached and moaned. Not verbally, not out loud, right? She was like, okay, but she had to work harder than my other kids, yet she complained less than everybody else, okay? So, and I pointed that out to her one time. Do you realize that you didn't? She's like, really? I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't vocalize the complaint. You weren't like whining like everyone else was. It's because that she's had it harder, that she showed better strength. It's because she's had to overcome that challenge, that little challenge, really, I mean, it's just a little challenge walking around, but she was able to totally subconsciously demonstrate just a touch more character in the face of a little challenge, you know, but that little inkling is the kind of thing that can grow into something more and more meaningful as she ages. And I wanted her to have that. And that's what we're going to talk about here too, right? The ways we can grow our strength, okay? So, while we're talking about a body, one of the things I really want to emphasize is our immune system. There are so many ways in which letting your immune system do its job, run through the stress, finish the process through the stress, that makes us all so much better. Now, granted, I work in healthcare, so this is a gift. This whole talk is a gift, but like, I want you guys to really grasp onto this one, okay? Like, here's an example. You know, a fever can be scary. A fever can be thought of as like, let's do something about that. It's still common that people will lovingly give their child something, a Tylenol or whatever else, to lower the fever, right? Taking some drug that like brings the heat down. Well, turns out that actually is worse on every level. Suppressing the fever makes the thing that the body's trying to fight off, the sickness, makes it longer. It can make it more complex. Turning off the fever leaves the person more vulnerable to more problems. And much more significantly, if you don't let the fever run its course, if you suppress a fever, like bigger, badder, more scarier diseases are more likely down the road. You know, someone's actually more likely to experience cancer if they've had their fever suppressed throughout childhood than if they didn't. Letting the immune system go through it, find its full solution, flex its muscles, and battle off what it needs to battle off without the interferences. A body is better, a life is better, an immune system is more adaptable, you know? This applies to not just fever, anytime. Anytime we are dealing with any kind of germ, your immune system has a deeply embedded memory to it. Like one example of this I just love is, so a mother, the adult mother, has gone through life, been through all kinds of circumstances, all kinds of environments, and her immune system has had to interact with all of those environments, all of those circumstances. Her immune system has safely determined what it needs to fight off and what it needs to not, right? And so what happens when that mother now has a little baby is, through nursing, the mother will pass living immune system cells through the milk to the baby. The baby, the brand new baby, will actually rely on mom's strength. The baby doesn't have its own immune system, but it will completely borrow the mother's wisdom. I think that's pretty cool. It's worth knowing, you know. It used to be thought that your immune system's job was simply to determine what part of our bodies belongs to us and what part doesn't. And it will attack the parts that aren't you, and it will just kind of like be fine with parts that are you. And it turns out it's way better and more interesting than that, because inside us all, there's actually more bacteria in you and on you than there are cells that make you. Your own cells, you are outnumbered. The DNA, bacterial and viral DNA on you and in you outnumbers your own DNA, right? There's countless trillions. In fact, if we were to strip all of the bacteria off of you and out of you and weight it, it'd be like 5 pounds, you guys. 5 pounds of you, I've told you that before. 5 pounds of you isn't actually you, it's your bacteria, okay? So next time you weigh yourself, just subtract 5 straight out.
-5.
You're good, right? So like all those bacteria are your friends, are allies, will actually protect you from other harmful stuff. So your immune system's job is not just as simply it's newly unappreciated, it's not just as simply to determine what's you and what's not you. It also has to determine what's you, what's not you, what's you but not a friendly thing like a cancer cell, and what's not you but what is friendly, like all these bacteria. Like it's so much more vast. And so how you stretch that, how you improve that, is you give your immune system experience. Okay? Like it used to be thought that a sterile environment is how I'm going to express the love for my child, right? I'm going to make sure everything is completely void of any germ whatsoever, right? Well, it turns out that actually weakens the immune system. That actually weakens the child's health, and that leaves the child more susceptible to all kinds of allergies and asthma and other things, just by living in a sterile environment. So instead, letting this child play in the mud, and while you're at it, eat a little bit of it. Anything. Every single kid's got to put some crap in their mouth, right? Something in their mouth, right? So letting that kid go through it, let their immune system discover its range, its depth of like what's good and what's not, being experienced, living it up, right? That range of experiences for immune system automatically translates to, not automatically, but like with a lot of great complexity actually, but the point is it does. It turns into strength, right? And it turns into a longer life. I have spoken to many an elderly person on this exact thing, and I like to give this power to anybody who's even watching, right? We're often, in our society, we don't respect our elders. It's just, we don't do it well. We don't respect elders very well. And one of the things we're also kind of like, the message we communicate to our elders is their weakness, okay, which I don't agree with, right? Like physical weakness, sure, but like also like, oh, that's a vulnerable population. We need to like do things, flu vaccines or whatever to support the elderly population and their immune system. Here's the thing about that. Every single season any of us go through, your immune system is dealing with and accommodating and figuring out and remembering. And it handles the germs for every single season. So the more seasons you live through, the more wise and diverse and adaptable your immune system is. Every single season, right? So I might have an elderly person sitting in front of me and I tell them this fact, and so I ask them, so whose immune system, yours or mine, is wiser, is more skilled, is a stronger, is a better immune system, you could say? And they're like, mine? I'm like, yeah. Like that's something we need to not undercut. Like hell, they've earned it. Let them have it. Let them appreciate the fact that they've gone through a lot more winters, say, than I have. Let's say, right, when I'm having this conversation, right? So know that just by being in the world and being exposed to stuff, testing yourself, okay? Now, back to my daughter and the emotions of it all, okay? So I had a dear friend of mine. He is a chiropractor. He had a practice across town, lived across town, and as things do sometimes, he went out of business. He was unsuccessful in his practice. And I and my wife and my kids, we went over and we loaded up his stuff from his office because he was closing up shop, we worked all morning and we loaded up his house and loaded up stuff, and we worked all afternoon. We drove all the way across town way across town to where they're newly moving, and then we worked on into the night. And we worked and worked and worked until late at night. After working, I threw up. I worked until exhaustion and threw up, and I wasn't going to stop because this was a friend of mine who was heartbroken and picking up the remaining pieces of his life, right? His failed venture and the pain that brings, the embarrassment that it brings. And I wasn't going to let him do it alone. I wasn't going to leave. and we were there all day, and many other days, but like, we were there until utter exhaustion, right? That's an example of like how you handle, you can, not that you have to go and throw up at somebody, but like being there, right? Now, I, however, demonstrated that, but then I didn't learn that well. Because I myself, I failed in my own first business, right? But in failing my own first business, I didn't reach out. Like, it was the pain, it was the shame, it was the embarrassment. And so I isolated myself. I was alone, and people asked me, so Aaron, how you doing? How's practice? And my answer was, fine, fine. I couldn't bring myself to be that vulnerable, right? So in my attempt at protecting myself, not willing to be vulnerable, I also hurt myself, right? Like I couldn't receive it, right? So I didn't learn that lesson well then. But I've learned that lesson since. In the last year and a half, 2 years, I've gone through some of the hardest emotional time of my life. I think about like the 5 hardest parts of my life, right? And so yeah, at this time, I'm kind of analytical that way. And this was definitely one of them. This is one of the top 5 hardest parts of my life I've just gone through, right? And I absolutely invested in being with people. You know, I put prayer out. I remember one time I'm in the shower and I'm like, I need help. I need help with a specific problem, and I need someone to help me with this very specific problem. It was a kid-parent problem I was having, and so I finished my little prayer and I go about my day, and I'm doing some grocery shopping at Whole Foods, and I'm walking out, and I just so happened to pass by a woman I haven't seen in a long, long time. It's actually a woman I consider my other mother, like a second mother to me. I come across this woman. I'm like, Ellie. She's like, Aaron. Give her a big hug. And then we finish our shopping. We meet up again. And she's like, how you doing? I'm like, I need help. And like, I actually prayed I needed help. And you're the answer. And so she's like, yeah. So we went to Starbucks. And we sat down and we talked for like a long time. And she gave me a good long talking to. And she called my wife later. And she laid out the wisdom and the gems, right? And my point in that is like reaching out, you know, not isolating yourself. So here's another example. Earlier this month, just a couple weeks ago, my wife's sister cousin, I call her that because they're all real close. You know, my wife's sister cousin, she just lost their 9-year-old son. It was on the 11th. And you know, there's been mourning in the whole family. There's been crying. And also, my wife is flying up to Canada next week because all the family is coming into town. And everyone's going to get together. And they're going to bring the whole town together. They're going to have a big celebration of this sweet boy's life. And people are going to bring food, and there's going to be laughing and crying and connection. And they'll be there for days together. My wife doesn't often get to go and visit all of her family without kids, but she's going to be there as an adult with other adults and get to cry and hug and hold and laugh and be with all these people, right? And so this precious child, we will continue to mourn, and yet this child will also be an inspiration for the connection that's going to happen. Like, we had a dear friend of ours. This dear friend, she lost her baby boy. He was 6 months old. He had an undetectable heart problem, and he didn't make it. Right? And so she and her husband, both chiropractors, went and immediately got counseling, because they discovered this notion that when parents lose a kid, 80% of those marriages fail, right? That's trauma, that stress, that pain, too much of a wedge, right? But they immediately got support. They got they got counseling and support, and training, and all kinds of things on how to get through this and how to heal. And so when my wife told our friend this, she immediately got the contact information of her cousin and wrote her a big long letter, and like saying like you're not alone, and this is how you handle this. This is the help you need to get, right? So she, through her experience, got to pass on to her. And so it's like, it's these, while there's loss, it's also connection, right? That's how you heal. All right. So what I'm getting at is, in our bodies, we have our stresses, right? Our stress responses. We talk about, everyone's heard of fight or flight, but it's more than that. It's way more than that. It's fight or flight and freeze, but it's way more than that too. Now everyone's heard of those things, fight, flight, and freeze, right? You've heard of freeze, right? You can't, you're paralyzed, you're stunned, you don't know what to do, or there's sort of like you check out kind of thing, you go numb, those types of things, okay? Now, those responses were studied by scientists who were looking at young college-aged men. And they discovered, this is the stress response. This is how this is done. But it wasn't studied on people of varying ages, and it wasn't studied on women, right? So we defined everything we once knew about stress response by young men, okay? And only lab-created type of responses. It was so, we were very, very incomplete in our understanding. But good thing, science has realized that it was only up until 20 years ago, only up until like 1998, that any studies were done, or virtually any studies were done, on stress responses that included women, right? Or different people of different ages. You know, it was very, very narrow, right? Very incomplete. And so, over the last 20 years, it's gotten a lot more complete. And so here's an example. They did this little stress test, and it was actually a group of men, and it was a group of businessmen. And it was this thing where, like, they were put into this very cutthroat type of like business scenario where you have to do this, you have to defeat that person, and you must succeed. You must make this money, and you must defeat this person, right? This very cutthroat experiment, right? So they put them through this stressful situation, and then they said, okay, the experiment's over, you can go out this way. But it turns out the experiment wasn't over, they just thought it was. And so they left this testing environment, and they would go into this area where you could like hang out, relax, you know, like the whatever room, you know, like the lounge. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So they're waiting around, they're talking around in the lounge, and they're hanging out. And there's these other opportunities that come up where they could actually like buy somebody something, or share something with somebody, or something like that nature. And it turns out, what would you think, by the way? What would you think? Do you think these guys who were primed to be in this stressful situation, this very cutthroat stressful situation, do you think they were more, their heart rates went up, their cortisol levels were up, like all their stress responses was still kicked up? Do you think they went out here and were still kind of like butted heads with people? No.
They started nurturing.
They exactly started nurturing people. They were generous. They were connecting. They were bonding with people. There is this whole other response when we are stressed. It's called tend and befriend. Everyone we like our rhymes with this thing, but the whole point is, do you know, have you guys ever heard of oxytocin? Like they call it the cuddle hormone. When that oxytocin goes up, it's a thing that helps us bond. Oxytocin goes up for everybody, men and women, when we're stressed. Oxytocin is a stress hormone. We all want connection with each other, right? We all need connection with each other. And when you give it to yourself, you do heal from those. You can come out of stress responses. But what I want you to get out of this too is, if you are already in a kind of mode, how do you come out of that mode? Like, let's say you're already stuck in this because it's a habit. Now we're going to talk about habits in a second here. But because it's a habit and you're okay, you're willing to fight in some way, or flee, right? Or let's just talk about getting angry, right? How do you get out of that? There are ways. There are very effective ways, okay? So, no particular order. One way is, very powerful, is let's say you're angry about something. If you can, find a sense of purpose in what you're doing. You're wading through something. You're going into something. Let's say it's some relationship, some situation, something that's making you angry or frustrated or something negative. Can you find meaning in it more than just say about yourself, as an example? Finding purpose in your suffering, in your stress, will immediately tweak that sensation of that stress. Here's the catch on this. Meaning and stress are actually intertwined. Like, if something did not have any meaning to you, if you did not care, if you did not give one rat's butt about it, like for instance, does any of us care about the earthworm situation in the soil of France? You do. I don't, right? Does anybody care about the situation of block making, brick kiln making in Norway? No, probably not, right? So somebody does, and it's stressful to them because it matters to them. There's meaning in that for them, but not for us, right? So if it means nothing to you, you can't be stressed about it. So if you are stressed about it, it must have meaning to you, okay? When I have struggle and strife with the relationship of my oldest son, it's because it means so much to me. Because if it's so painful and so hard or so challenging or so stressful, because it means so damn much to me, right? So first off, know that. And the more present in your own mind and heart you can become to the meaning, it will inform the stress you feel about it, okay? It will subside some pain you might experience on it, okay? Is she breathing okay? Okay, all right. So, here's another one. Now, I want to draw a contrast between pity and compassion, okay? There's a difference, there's an important difference. Pity is when someone is going through something and you're like, oh man, that sucks. Sorry, right? Now, what makes it different, what makes that turn into compassion is you see yourself in it. You're not above that problem. You can actually tangibly walk in their shoes. You can feel that sense, right? So if there's something negative, some sort of like, that sucks, I'm sorry, whatever, right? But when you can feel like, how is that also like me? How could I also have to experience something like that? Sharing a sense of bond with that person, immediately that is compassion, that elicits compassion. And that changes the stress responses you have inside. Just like having a greater sense of meaning changes the hormone profile you have inside yourself. Here's another one. Let's say you are experiencing crap, right? Or specifically, you feel a sense of threat. There's something that matters to you that's at stake, and it's threatened. Okay? So instead of sensing this threat, if you can claim it as a challenge, if you can instead interpret that like, I can bring to bear some skill, if I can bring to bear some level of power, some level of authority to make something happen, change something, tweak something, right? Applying some skill, some ability, some willingness, something. You are now tweaking it from a threat to a challenge because you're bringing to bear your strengths. Okay? So, any of those interpretations, finding compassion, finding meaning, seeing it as a challenge, all of that, it changes the way what different parts of your brain work. It changes the different types of amounts of hormones you have. Okay? It even changes the stresses on your cardiovascular system. So, I'll tell you, I'm teaching this, and I learn this, and I try to apply it, but I still don't always master this lesson. Just not too long ago, I was pretty upset, and I went to bed pretty darn upset, and I woke up to chest pains. Telling you and telling the whole world now, right? I woke up to chest pains. Chest pain is reverberated around my whole rib cage. I'm like, It scared me too. I'll just tell you straight. Scared my wife too, and I measure a special thing about my heart rate every single morning, and my heart rate, it's called HRV, heart rate variability. I won't talk about that now, but it was off. It was off for like 10 days. So it's like a real event. Now here's the thing: when you're really stressed and you're in that fight or flight, what's happening is your blood vessels also get nice and tight, so they can pump blood real fast. Okay. However, if you feel compassion, if you instead maybe feel a sense of courage, you maybe explore your challenges instead of just see threats, you can have the same heart rate going, you can have the same other responses in there, but your blood vessels, they open up. You can actually have wide open blood vessels in the midst of like this stressful situation if you are perceiving it like, a challenge.
Find purpose.
What?
Find purpose.
Purpose, okay? In fact, you'll even produce hormones that heal and protect your heart, your cardiovascular system. Okay, it's a good thing I have men in this audience tonight, because like when people get stressed, men and women do the burden it bears on our bodies are a little bit different between men and women. Okay, for a woman's body, the body will turn off expensive body systems to divert energy towards her stress response. The systems that are turned off are, or at least dimmed down, is digestion and reproduction. So, for instance, if a woman is chronically stressed, digestion will be troublesome, whether it be really slow or much too much. Usually it's too slow, right? Or the cycle can be off, weird, have troubles in female parts department, right? Okay, or both, frankly. Those are two common things that a woman who's under chronic stress will experience. Okay, a man under chronic stress, the way we do it is it's basically all cardiovascular system. Okay, so part of the catch here is interrupting that habit. Now let's talk about that habit. Okay, your brain has two things it always wants to balance out when it's running your life. Okay, thing number one is how well you adapt, how well you deal with whatever life is thrown at you. Adaptability, like that's increase blood pressure when you need to or lower when you need to, sleep when you need to, be awake when you need to, everything, right? Monitor how hungry you are or not hungry, how much muscle strength or not, how much memory or not, like all kinds of adaptability every single moment. Even when you guys are just sitting here, you're doing a hell of a lot more than just sitting here. You're listening to me, hopefully not trying to fall asleep, you're listening, watching, whatever, right? Stuff's going on and your body's adapting to it, okay? Now, the other thing your body needs to do at the same time as adapting is it needs to be really efficient. It needs to make sure it's adapting, but not spending too much money to do it. Now, money in the body is your calories, is energy, right? So it cannot spend too much energy doing any one thing because it needs to make sure it has enough energy to do the next thing. And sometimes it doesn't know what the next thing is, okay? What your body does is it tries to anticipate what that next thing could be, and it will base that anticipation off of all the things you've done before. So your body turns things into habits, okay? A habit is a really efficient thing. Have you ever had the experience of driving to work and getting to work and you realize, I didn't really pay attention to anything I was doing driving? Like you just totally did an automatic pilot? Of course, we all have. Every one of us has. We've all gotten dressed and not had to figure out how to tie a shoe or put on our pant leg. And you don't think, did I put my left leg in or my right leg in? You may not even know because you don't consciously do it anymore. So much of our lives is habit driven because it's so efficient. Okay, so note here: some people who are exhausted, totally exhausted, can't get out of habits because it takes too much energy. They don't have enough energy to even hop out of that rut. Okay, chiropractic care plays into this. I'm a chiropractor. This is what I do. Right? Chiropractic care plays into this because of what it does on the brain level. The fundamental thing it does on the brain level is it kind of helps someone snap out of the habit just for that moment. It helps their nervous system snap out of it. So their nervous system has now a chance to maybe adapt properly as opposed to just stay in the same. It can snap out of it and go like, wait a minute, we could do this differently. All right? Like one of those examples being, I've had so many patients tell me, man, I don't feel anxious anymore. I've had some patients tell me, I'm not depressed. I can now work. I've had some patients tell me, one in particular, I've had one patient tell me, I haven't lost my temper in a scary way with my wife or kids in a long time now. See, those habits are part of our emotional response too, okay? What your body does is it's expecting, right? Think about this. Have any of you ever had a challenging relationship with anybody? Yeah. We have one person who hasn't, but everybody else, let's just say, we've experienced a challenge. All right, now, have you ever thought about and ruminated about that challenging person? Have you ever been about to go and meet with that person for some uncontrollable reason, and you're like, is this anybody else experience this? We all do, of course. And you're playing out this building thing. You're doing your part, and you're imagining what they'll say, and you're doing your part, and you're imagining what they'll say, and it builds and it builds and it builds. Okay. Now the reality is, none of that is real. None of that's real. Now, all of that is imagined, but your body response is real. Your heart rate is elevating, your blood pressure is elevating, your body is deploying blood sugar for you to be able to do whatever I need to do for this challenge, right? It's building up, okay? And so, but here's the other thing. Your brain is, check, we've had just another experience that required all that energy deployment. And let's say you actually go and meet with this person, and the experience is nothing like you imagined it to be. It may not be pleasant, but it was nothing like you were worst case preparing your catastrophe for in your mind, right? But that one little incident that was no big deal, your brain pays a little bit of attention to that. But the next time you're about to gear up for this conversation and your brain again thinks that is real, and check, okay, so in other words, the few real experiences and all the imaginary experiences are lumped together, and basically your brain kind of creates an average of all that. So the real ones might be just here, and all those imaginary ones are up here, and your brain gives equal weight, or actually more weight, because you have so many more imagined experiences. But here's that thing. Your brain now thinks every time it needs that much energy to deal with the situation. It's not creating a correct prediction. Okay? So the way you interrupt that, there's a couple ways you can interrupt that. One way is, getting chiropractic adjustments help your nervous system do all this better. Okay? But you don't always have a chiropractor following you around. Okay? At least you shouldn't.
Right?
All right. So there's a couple tools here. One of them is kind of like what we were saying, getting compassionate, feeling a sense of courage, but also getting real, getting very much in your present time awareness, getting clear what is actually happening and what's not. What happened there last time and what's not, right? Getting present is always helpful. Becoming more aware. Right? But the other one here is actually trying to get, and the way that helps you get present, this is like leverage, is...
What do you mean by getting present?
Okay, so I am going for a walk this morning, and I know I'm going to turn the bend and walk this way, and I might see my son walking to the bus stop. And we had a little bit of friction last night, and I'm walking, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to say hi to him or something like that. He's just going to ignore me, walk by me. And I'm thinking to myself, and that's going to piss me off. And so I'm getting prepared for this thing. So I'm not exactly present. So instead, I bring myself back to my senses and realize, okay, none of that conversation I'm just imagining was actually happening. I'm still walking. It's still a pleasant morning. I'm breathing the air. I'm enjoying myself. Right? And then I do see my son. And he missed the bus, and he's walking. And I say to him, I call out to him, and I ask, hey, you want a ride? And he's like, no, Mom said I couldn't have a ride. I'm like, all right, well, you want company? He's like, yeah. none of that is what I expected, but the point is instead of continuing the internal conversation between what I'm imagining him to say and what I'm saying, actually just get present and clear with what's actually being said. Like just letting all the extra voices settle
Okay.
down and just let his voice and my voice be present. You got me?
Mhm.
What I meant earlier too, and again, coming to your senses. If you're just ruminating up here, okay, plotting out this big terrible confrontation that hasn't happened yet, right? Rather than doing that, just instead feel the wind on your skin and feel your shoes on your feet, okay? You feel your body, and that helps you come present and not get carried away in this thing, okay? Now, anyway, the other tool here is, the tool to get present is, this is called emotional granularity. It's when actually asking yourself, getting clear with yourself, how do I feel right now? What do I actually feel right now? Like, am I frustrated? Am I a little bit annoyed? Am I a little angry? Am I a little hurt? Do I feel vulnerable? Like, rather than just leaving it as, I feel crappy, or I feel angry, or I feel good, or I feel neutral, right? Like getting a really, really, really detailed slice of that shade of gray, being able to actually have like a sense or a word of, how do I exactly feel right now? That pulls you present, okay? Getting clearer about what you're actually feeling right now, also in a way, gives you feedback up here, gives your brain a sense of like more feedback, so it doesn't always rev you up for this stressed experience. It doesn't always rev you up. Instead, you are interrupting that and maybe only responding to a layer that you need to, as opposed to your imaginary layer. Can you relate to that? Okay. Any questions about that stuff? Okay. So, I want to read over something here. Hang on. So, the thing about our stresses, knowing that, how you see it. Like, I went to this one seminar one time. It was called the Landmark Forum, and it was pretty good, pretty powerful, pretty useful. I got a lot out of it, right? But after, like, the whole seminar, it kind of comes to this one like culminating point. I'll actually, I'm going to give you the nugget at the end of it. And it may not make perfect sense, but here's the idea. Like, you know, life is kind of like meaningless, but you make the meaning. Like, I'm just giving credit where that I learned that first, but the idea is we are the meaning makers in our life, okay? Most things that happen are not inherently pregnant with meaning into themselves. We make that meaning. We are the meaning makers, right? And what you choose to interpret, how you choose to make something mean, makes the difference in how your body responds, how well your mind thinks, how healthy your body can become, okay? They did a giant study, 30,000 people, and followed them for years. And they basically asked people, how much stress do you have? Like, low or high, right? And people said what they had. And then they asked them, well, how bad do you think that stress is on you? And people said, nah, no big deal. People said, it's a huge deal, right? And then they followed these people for years, and they looked to see, well, who died, right? And this is what they found out. So guess which group died the most? The ones who had the highest stress or the lowest stress?
Highest.
Yeah, the ones who had the high stress died the most. Now, guess which group died the least? The one with high stress or the low stress?
Lowest.
No, it turns out the highest again. The people with the highest stress, who also felt like the stress was bad for them, died the most. The people who had the highest stress, but felt that the stress wasn't bad for me, died the least. The people who had the least stress were in the middle. Follow that? Like,
I follow it, but I don't think I comprehend it.
so what I'm saying is, the worst thing is to have a lot of stress and to think the stress is really bad. That's the worst thing. The next worst thing is to have low stress, regardless if you think it's good or bad. The best thing was to have a lot of stress
And embrace it.
and embrace it. Okay?
I'm gonna die sooner than you then.
Now listen, that thing about the stress now, remember, like, stress and meaning are intertwined. The people who had a lot of stress also had the most meaning in their life, and they were present to it. Okay?
Investment.
Yeah, right?
Mm.
There's another one. How about this one? A group of people got into car accidents. Like they tracked a bunch of people who got in a bunch of car accidents. Well, okay, at a hospital, people came in from a traumatic car accident. The next person came in from a traumatic car accident, right? So they tracked people that are coming, right? So among all these people who got into car accidents, they measured all kinds of stuff like blood chemistry and stress hormones, all that stuff. And some people had really high, crazy high stress hormones, and some people had low stress hormones. Now, among this group, these people, who do you think had post-traumatic stress disorder and who did not? So who had post-traumatic stress disorder? The people with the high stress hormones or the low? So high stress hormones meant post-traumatic stress disorder. Low stress hormones meant low stress, like no post-traumatic stress disorder. It turns out it was exactly the opposite. Yes. Exactly the opposite. The highest stress hormones, what that means is their body deployed energy, adapted. Remember? Adaptation. The brain, the body, the being of the person kicked in all of its resources and dealt with it. That stress response spared them of ongoing traumatic disorder. Okay? The ones who could not generate a response, they had post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder, the exact opposite, is, first of all, we've all heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD. We've all heard of that. It's very well known. It turns out it's actually quite rare. It's actually quite rare. Do you know its opposite is actually very, very, very common, and it's called post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. You know what, in layman's terms, we call that? Yeah, you do. It's called character. It's called strength. Okay? You go through a trauma, your body really generates a response, and you learn from it, and we all grow from it. And all of you sitting here, I know all of you, and so I know each and every one of you have a wealth of character. You've gone through crap, and you've come out the other side of it. You've still held lives intact. You've still relationships intact. Health is intact. Careers are intact. Relationships, ongoingly, right? By definition, you all are wealthy in character, right? So, if you could have a magical pen that just erased away stresses in your life, you go back in time, or you could erase away stress from your child's lives, like, you would also make them weaker and poorer for it. You know, like, you know, I've got 4 wonderful children, and I want all the best for them, right? But, like, I have this notion too in my head, and like, they go through hardships. Like my younger son, he's having a hell of a time with girls these days, you know. A hell of a time. And it's like, you know, you just be there with him, and it will go to work on you. And you can tell him, you know, son, you'll get through it, and it'll be okay. But yeah, I don't hear that, right? You know, that's not that helpful at the time. But you just say, yeah, it sucks. I'm with you. Knowing that through that pain and pressure and they're growing something. They're growing something, you know? And just like I do not medicate my kids when they're sick, and let them go through it and build that immune system strength, I want them to build strength in their soul. You know, sometimes it's hard fought and it's expensive. But you still want them to have strength in their soul, you know. Like you all want your children and you want for yourself. You know? So, I guess that's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing is just knowing and accepting the fact that stress can enhance you. Just knowing it automatically makes it so. When your body goes, blah, when your heart's pounding and you're feeling stuff, that is your body deploying energy for you to use. It is your mind giving you focus to get through its challenge. It is giving you these resources to deploy into this challenge in your life. It is not something going crazy malfunction most of the time. Okay? Your body is worthy of your trust. Okay? The way that things go, it's worthy of your trust. And I would have you do this. I would leave you with this one last thought. We are, like I was talking about that range that you want to give your immune system, that goes for your emotions in your life too, you know? Giving yourself a broader range, like being cold temperature, being hot temperature, sure, but make yourself comfortable in a group full of people. Make yourself comfortable in front of a camera, you know? Make yourself uncomfortable talking to somebody. Make yourself uncomfortable telling your truth. Make yourself uncomfortable by shutting up, you know? Make yourself uncomfortable in ways that you find. When you find an edge, just push it a little bit here and there. Give your nervous system, your soul, your mind, your being broader range, because we Americans have done a great job taking care of ourselves, but we've narrowed the range of our experience very, very tight. Okay? It's like we just very, very tight.
Problems with efficiency.
Partly, entirely actually, right? So, that's what I would have for you. Grow and push yourself. Accept stress as enhancing, because it's true. You know? So, I think I'm gonna leave it at that. You guys got any questions? Bravo. You guys got any questions? I'll turn off the camera.